Alexa, 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 connect.
Nighty night. Get some good rest.
No, Alexa, open settings.
Here's settings. Now connected to Diane's PC.
Acquiesce to, and that'll take all the meaning out of your life.
The adventure of your life. You say, imagine who you could be, and then aim single-mindedly at that. I encounter these young people who appear to know who they could be, or they've imagined who they could be, but for whatever reason, they seem to choose the certain misery of their current situation, the job that's sucking their soul out, or that relationship, over the uncertainty they'll encounter as they go on the adventure of their life. So what would I say to these young people who always say to me, Steve, I want to do this, but you can see them stifled by fear, because it's like...
Yeah, well, it's like, make a plan, man. So when I was doing my clinical work, which I did a lot of career work with my clients, both at a beginner level, I would say, like really a beginner level, with people who had no employment whatsoever, no history of employment, who were undereducated and who lacked every skill you could possibly imagine. So these were people who were really in dire straits, up to people who were operating at the top of their profession, but who could still strategize forward. And so, for example, let's say you're at a dead end in your job. Okay, so I don't find my work meaningful. All right, so that's a problem statement. It's like, well, why not? I find the work I do repetitive and boring and without spirit. I have a bad relationship or a neutral relationship with my boss who doesn't know who I am. I have problems with coworkers. All of that needs to be differentiated, right, and analyzed in detail. So we might say, for example, let's say you believe that you're undervalued at work, and maybe you are. What you need to do is you have something to say, and we would have to figure out what it is that you have to say. But it would be some variant of, I'm bringing more value to the table than I'm being compensated for, and that's demoralizing me. And it's also not good for you being my boss, because if I'm actually more valuable than is being recognized, then the fact that you're not valuing me properly means that I will become demoralized, I won't work properly, and you won't get the best out of me. So it's bad for both of us. And if your boss is in principle not amenable to such a discussion, then what you should seriously consider doing is finding another job. Okay, so let's say we're going to set you up for this. Okay, this isn't like next week's enterprise, man. This is your life. So the first thing I would ask is, well,
Hello, Gernati
do you have your resume or CV in order?
3434.
Well, I haven't typed
Hi,
it up for 3
Kali,
years.
ex Kalala.
Well, what do you think about bringing it up?
Welcome
Well,
to
I'm pretty
Sky.
nervous about that because there's some holes
How
in
are
it.
you
And,
there?
you know, I didn't do so well in
From
college.
what
And I'm kind of embarrassed about my
place
resume.
are you?
It's like, okay, bring it in. Let's go through it. Let's at least update it. Let's look where the holes are. Let's look at where the inadequacies are as far as you're concerned, right? This isn't my judgment, it's your judgment. Let's walk through those
From
judgments
what?
and see if they're warranted. Because maybe you're just too guilty, ashamed, and
Philippines
self-conscious
or
and
not?
anxious, and you're looking at your resume more critically than someone else would. And maybe there's some holes that you need to rectify. You know, you were 2 courses away from your BA and you dropped out or something like that. Well, maybe we need 6 months to address that. And at least, even if you can't be fully educated, you could be taking
What's
some courses
up
online.
there?
And so when you went to a new job interview and they said, what
Kamusta
about
na
this
kayo?
hole? You'd say, well,
How
I
are you guys?
came to terms with that 6 months ago, and in an effort to rectify it, I'm taking the following courses, and here's my plan for completion. That's a really good answer. And anyone with any sense who's interviewing will accept
Yes.
that as an indication that
I
although
am
you're not
in
perfect, and who
Philippines.
is, that you have a good plan and that you've thought through.
Philippines.
Like, that's the kind of answer that in all likelihood
Pilipinas.
will cement your candidacy for the position.
Can I ask
Okay,
me
so
your
now
manager's
you're going to go
name?
to your boss. Well, you have to have your CV and your resume in order, and you have to be able to stand on it solidly, and which at least means
Hi,
that you're prepared to
JP
address the
Bonilla.
inadequacies in a
Ricardo
credible,
Valdez.
realistic, believable, and
Ah,
truthful
bakas
manner.
kampo, yun na.
All right, now what you do is
You know,
apply for like 10 jobs. You don't have to take them,
marami
but
kasing
maybe you have
scammer
to go to an
ngayon.
interview or 2 or 3 or 4, and maybe there's a bunch of opportunities out there for you that you didn't even know about. And maybe someone offers you a job. And so now you can go to your boss and say, here's the situation I'm in here at work.
I don't
Here's
have
my
husband.
evaluation of the problems in relationship to me. Here's what I could do for you if you gave me a 40% raise and the opportunity to progress, but I'd like to see a plan for that. And I'd be looking for other opportunities before conducting this discussion.
No,
And I have some.
husband, no.
Well, then, if your boss treats you with contempt at that point and doesn't listen, then perhaps he or she is a little more narcissistic than might be optimal, and it's time to find a new job. But this isn't something you do trivially. And so when you're doubtful, say you're trapped, you ask yourself, well, why am I
This is
trapped?
just fashion.
That's a hard
brain,
question,
you
right?
know.
Because some of it's
No
your
ring
own
here.
inadequacy, a lot of it, and all of the part of it that you can deal with is your own inadequacy. So even if it's unfair, even if you're hemmed in for any number of reasons, inappropriate, like ethnically predicated oppression, let's say, or maybe you're in a workplace that really is sexist in some fundamental sense. Well, that's not good. It's not just. It's not fair. It's not meritorious. All of those things. And maybe you shouldn't be there. But what you can do to begin with is every bloody thing you possibly can do to put yourself in the most virtuous and powerful negotiating position possible. And you have to think like a snake in some sense. To do that, you got to get the details right. You have to be prepared to bite, and you have to have your eyes on the prize, so to speak. And people aren't taught this sort of thing ever, really. They're not taught how to negotiate. They're not taught how to goal set. They're not taught how to conceptualize appropriate success in some broad sense. In some sense, that's what the humanities are supposed to teach people. So,
On that point of understanding my inadequacies or someone's inadequacies, I really believe
Wala, hindi po ako
that
namimigay ng
it's really
Gcash.
difficult to undergo self-development if you don't
No.
have self-awareness. And I was really
Ah,
trying to
okay,
understand
okay.
from your writings how someone is to build their self-awareness. It's almost like the unknown unknown. If you don't have it, how do you build the thing?
I know a good exercise for that. It's like a prayer in some sense. In fact, I would say it's proper prayer. If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you got to mean this. Like, you got to be desperate. This is no game, this. It's like, my life is not everything I want it to be, and perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's attendant upon that has made me nihilistic, cynical, bitter,
I
resentful,
don't do free
homicidal,
Gcash po.
genocidal,
Sorry.
unable to have a good relationship, prone to punish people for their virtues because of my jealousy, driving the proclivity to see evil everywhere except within my own heart. Like, these are problems, man. And you ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. Like, what's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? It's like, you meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. And it's often something that will point you to small things. So Carl Jung said, people in the modern world don't see God because they don't look low enough. And so imagine you're in your messy bedroom, and you're sitting on the edge of the bed trying to have an honest dialogue with yourself. And the little voice says, it's pretty
Yes, po
disgusting
your
in here.
message.
And you think, well, I'm way above such trivial niceties as organizing my room. Well, that's pride. That's arrogance. If you're above organizing what's actually yours, how in the world are you ever going to organize anything else? And so you get on your knees and you think, well, it's time to, take a brush to the toilet. And maybe that's where you start. And that works. Like, that works. You start making those micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real on the ground, actual micro improvements to things that are wrong, you'll improve unbelievably rapidly.
Well,
Eine zweite Staatsbürgerschaft? Es ist einfacher, als du glaubst. Mehr als nur ein Plan B. Es ist dein Ticket zu echter Freiheit. Unser kostenloser Ratgeber zu Staatsbürgerschaften zeigt dir, wie du legal zu deinem zweiten Pass kommst und warum das dein Leben verändern kann. Erfahre, wie du durch Investment, Abstammung oder Auswanderung in eine zweite Staat...
Hindi mo talaga kayang gawin lahat mag-isa. Kailangan mo talaga ng kakampi. Sige! Labanan mo! Kruk! Kailangan natin ng solid na timpla. Boom! Bam! Game na. Hello guys, kumusta? Ito na kayo. Set up ko lang yung camera ko. So, ayun guys, may confession ako kasi hindi lang ako vlogger. Gamer din ako. Bago tayo maglaro, kailangan mo natin ng power up. So, para magkaroon tayo ng energy, magluluto tayo ng adobo. Tara, samahan niyo ako sa kusina ni Joshua. Para sa akin, parang cheat code yan eh. Parang sa game. Kahit na naka-corner ka na, basta may isang special item ka, kayang-kaya pa rin. Itong adobong to, yung special item ko, laban sa gutom. At para sa cycles na to, kailangan natin ng solid na timpla. Yan. Kumbaga yan lang, mamarinate nyo lang yung manok. Pwede rin itong overnight kung gusto nyo mas malaki.
Hi, at Meow
Pero
Meow.
kasi nagmamadali tayo eh. Kasi maglalaro na tayo, di ba? Bilis lang to. Ayan. So ngayon na na-marinate na natin, lalagay na ngayon natin siya sa pan. Bam! And then, lalagay natin ng konting tubig. Tapos hindi natin lalagay yung itlog kasi kapag nilagay natin, overcook yung itlog natin. So, pang last topping siya. Tapos yan, papakulo na natin. Bilis lang to, sabi ko sa inyo. Diba? Ilang seconds yun. Tapos yan. Ngayon, hintayin lang natin ng mga 30 minutes kapag kumulo na. Okay na yun. Kruk, kruk, kruk. Boom! Instant bop! Teka, kuha lang ako ng kanin, ha? So ngayon, magpe-plating na tayo. Patayin lang natin. Bam! So, kuha ka itlog. Kahit saan mo gusto lagay. Tsaka natin i-drizzle yung sauce. Bam!
Hi guys, what's up?
Ano na yan, guys?
What's happening at your place there?
Hindi para cozy. Bam!
Philippines, still Philippines.
Adobo bowl?
Nothing new, but
Alam niyo guys, natutunan ko, hindi mo talaga kayang gawin lahat.
What's
mag-isa.
good in
Kailangan mo talaga ng
Philippines?
kakampi. Kailangan mo nang tutulong sa'yo.
The
Pero ito yung kakampi
beach.
ko. Laro plus adobo.
beach, good weather. Yeah, not so expensive.
Balik na tayo sa laro. Oh, sige! Sige! Labanan mo! Nice one! Sabay! Ito ang matapang mo. Nice one, boys! Ayan, guys! Maraming salamat sa pagsama.
Hello.
From gaming to
At
cooking.
Meow
At syempre, masarap na kwentuhan. See you next time.
Thanks
Dito
for
sa
watching this
Kusina ni Joshua.
live.
Kain. Adobo made easy. Try Dato Puti Adobo series. Just pour, cook, and serve.
Rest day today. So, taong bahay lang tayo. Best feeling ever.
what you're talking about there sounds to me not like an overdose of arrogance and also the need for humility. Do you think the Western world suffers from arrogance because of our relative privilege and luxury that we kind of overlook?
Of course, well, that's a temptation, right? I mean, when the radical lefty types go after people for their unearned privilege, they have a point. Now, the point is, The existentialists called it thrownness, which is not, that's a Heideggerian term. And throne is the fact that we kind of experience life as if we're tossed into it, thrown into it. You know, you're male and not female, you're Hindu and not
I don't
Christian.
like the fragrance.
You're tall and not short.
It's-
You have an arbitrary range of talents and an arbitrary range of limitations, none of which, in some sense, you chose. It's the cards you're dealt. Now, some of those are cards of privilege. You know, maybe you're born intelligent. Maybe you're born symmetrical. Maybe you're born healthy. Maybe you're born into a culture where it's much easier not to be absolutely deprived. Maybe your parents are rich. And so all of that, in some sense, is unearned. Now, along with that comes a good dose of existential guilt. Because at the same time, and this is true for anyone, regardless of their cultural background,
Thanks for the like.
ground we walk on is soaked in the blood of historical atrocity. And so that's on you. Because, you know, people think, well, who's the Nazi? Well, it's the fascist, or who's the radical communist? It's the radical left-wing ideologue. And the fundamental truth of the matter is that's best dealt with as a spiritual matter. Is the adversary is within, really, most profoundly. And so you have to take the responsibility for that historical atrocity onto yourself. I was talking to Guy Ritchie this week about his movie King Arthur. It's quite an interesting movie in many ways. And when Arthur, who could be the hero, takes the sword, he's so overcome by visions of his murderous uncle that he can't pick up the weapon. Well, think about that. Now, you have weapons at your disposal, but they've been used by your murderous uncle. How dare you wield them? And the answer is, maybe it's easy just to leave the sword on the ground because you do want to be responsible for atrocities going forward, and don't think you couldn't be, and don't think you might not enjoy it. And so, the way you pay for your privilege is with your virtue. I mean that most particularly. You have these opportunities and this existential guilt, and the way you expiate that and atone is
My
by
face is red.
doing your best to live the best possible life you can manage, to speak the truth, to treat people with respect, to abide by the principles of the dignity of the individual, and to put your house in order. And that's how you pay for your unearned privilege. All of us. And we all have our privileges and our curses, you know. All of us have that. That's why it's not useful to be envious of people. You know, you're a young man, you see someone drive by in a Ferrari with a blonde, and you think, my God, he's got everything. And, you know, the woman in the car is a prostitute who's got a cocaine addiction, and her life is just one catastrophe after another. And he's had to lie and cheat his way into this position, and he's afraid that everything's going to come crashing down on him, and that's what you're jealous of. And it's just not that profound. You don't want someone else's fate. Man, your fate's enough. And your adventure's enough.
Oh,
It's
thanks
plenty.
for the
It's
heart.
more than you can ever fully realize.
Who's our thing here?
And so that's also
You can
part of the
see.
reason that we all believe that the individual has some intrinsic dignity. It's don't be so sure that your position in your room is so damn trivial. It might be your attitude towards it that's trivial. And if you're in dire straits and dire circumstances, just look at how much opportunity you have to make things better. So, not that it's easy. You don't even want it to be easy. You know, so
On that point of you don't want it to be easy, I really contended with this idea of struggle and chaos in my life and the role it plays. And once upon a time, I thought I was trying to rid my life of chaos and struggle. I thought that's why I was trying to get rich and get the Ferrari and the blonde. I thought that would create a life free of struggle. But then I looked at some studies, and I sort of heard about this thing called gold medal depression, when Olympians come back from the Olympics and they've lost orientation. And then the day when someone offered to buy my
Favorite kind
company
of
for a
art.
nine-figure number, and it filled me with this emptiness and this dread. And I tried to understand the role that struggle would have to play for me to be a fulfilled human being for the rest of my life.
yeah, well, the observation with regard to your company, that's a great observation. I mean, we're built to walk uphill, and when reach the pinnacle of the hill, you want to stop and appreciate the vision, but the next thing you want is a higher hill in the distance, because it's the uphill climb that it's from the uphill climb that we derive our value, and I mean this technically. So almost all the positive emotion we feel, especially the emotion that fills us with enthusiasm, and that's to be filled with the Spirit of God, by the way, because that's what enthusiasm means. That's experienced in relationship to a goal. And so in some
God,
sense, and this is
38
part of the
minutes.
religious enterprise, you want a goal that you can never attain, right? So you can always move closer to the goal that recedes as you move towards it. You think, well, that's frustrating. It's like Sisyphus pushing the rock uphill. But it's not, because as you pursue that goal, you put yourself together and your life does get better and richer and more abundant. That's why the highest levels of virtue and goal are in some sense transcendent. You want them to be
Pero
above everything you're doing, so you can
lucky.
continually move towards something that's more sublime and better. That's what you are. You're here to live, not to sleep. And the problem with the vision of Mai Tais on the beach is that, well, first of all, that's a vision of drug-induced unconsciousness. Second, it's only going to work for about a week. Third, you're going to be a laughingstock in a month and depressed and aimless.
Bye-bye,
and
guys.
goalless.
I'm gonna.
It's
I'm
that's
going
not,
to
you
box
want a horizon of ever expanding
box
possibility. And so it does happen to
underarm.
people because they've
Thank you
staked
for
their
watching this
soul
live. Bye
on the
bye. See you
attainment
next
of an instrumental goal.
time.
And it can be a pretty high order goal. It was
Have
in
a
your
great
case.
day
But
there.
then you
Take
think,
care. Bye
well,
bye.
now I'm there. Now what?